life. The spice expands consciousness.
Hello, this is Dr. Stephen Greer, and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Greer. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us every 2 weeks here. And this is an opportunity for us to kind of catch people up on what's happening with the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, CSETI, and the Disclosure Project.org, as well as the Orion Project.org. And today we have a really wonderful guest on the show, Trudy Guyker. And Trudy has been a member of our senior contact team and involved with the work of CSETI, being out under the stars, making contact with us for over 15 years, since 1995, in fact. And I have to say that Trudy is one of the people, when we're out under the stars, I rely on most for the remote viewing and the spiritual connection in higher consciousness that we strive for, and the insight into what's going on behind the scenes, as it were, behind just what's seen in space with craft flying around and what have you. And Trudy has been really a very close friend, and I think of her as my sort of a spiritual twin sister. So, and she lives in the Phoenix area of Arizona, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome Trudy to the show. Thank you, Trudy.
Thank you, Steve, very much for your kind words.
Well, part of what I want to do in this hour that we have is to talk about the sorts of experiences that we've had over the years, and it goes back many years. Those of you who, if you go to disclosureproject.org, there's a book that came out a little over a year ago called Contact, Countdown to Transformation, and it has a DVD that comes with it that has the images of the sightings and the craft and the tones and all the experiences we've had out under the stars together as a team, and it actually goes all the way back to 1992. And but one of the things, accounts that are in that book that we shared together when we were creating it was a trip that we took down to Mexico in the 1990s. And as I set the stage, beginning in, I believe it was 1993, Sherry Adamak and I and others would go down to Mexico near this large volcano. And there is a volcano called Popo, for short, outside Mexico City. It's the fourth largest volcano in the world. And there had been a lot of reports of a very large craft, a triangular craft, as well as discs seen there. And as many of you may know, you may have seen videotape of these objects. In fact, when we first went there, the first year, is when we had this about 800 to 900 foot on each side triangular ship, fully materialized, that came from the direction of the volcano, and it came right over us. And I signaled to it with a high-powered light, and it turned on its axis and came right over at us and then signaled back. And it was only a couple hundred feet in the air. And this would have been the size of about 3 football fields, silently floating. And that was in 1993. And what we have had happen since other trips has been sort of an escalation of contact in that area. And when we first went there, we went to this little town of Atlixco, which is on the far side of the volcano from Mexico City, in a very remote area, and not too far from the town of Pueblo. And it turned out that the police chief and virtually 90% of the town had seen these objects just floating right over their heads and flying around. So it was a very not uncommon, I should say, thing to see. In fact, there was a monastery there where the priest one night had been out and saw these discs fly right over the monastery of this little town of Atlixco. And when I went there and I gave a talk, there was a Kiwanis club, of all things, in this town, and they actually gave me, somewhere in my archives, I have a little poster banner, a felt banner, like they would have at these sort of civic organizations, with a picture of the volcano and the name and logo for the Kiwanis Club for Atlixco, and there's the picture of the volcano with a UFO hovering right beside it, because everyone in this civic organization had seen them. And so this is sort of setting the stage of this area in Mexico where so many things were being seen at that time. And so a few years later, we went down, I believe it was Bob Haregrove and you, Trudy, and myself, and there may have been some others, and Sherry, and we went to this same area where we'd gone originally in 93. I think this year it must have been in 96 or something.
97.
96 or 97, yes, 97. And it was very interesting because we had a series of experiences that happened. I remember one evening, unfortunately there had been a lot of forest fires in the area that year, and some of the area had been very smoky and what have you, but we were in this one particular area and looking over at a hillside, often not very far away actually, and we saw this set of triangular lights. And to look at them, you would have thought that they were 3 street lights or lights on houses or something. And they were there for a very, very long time. And as it turned out, when we talked to the people in the area the next day, it was an area where there was no electrification, lights of any kind. And it was the same triangular craft that was just hovering there watching us during an event that I want to share and set the stage for. Now, you know, at that time, back in those days, and again, this is going back 13 years or more, we had these high-powered lights that we would shine to show the ETs our location. Now we use these really bright green lasers to vector ET craft into where we are, and these protocols are described in this book I just referred to, Contact Countdown to Transformation. And as I mentioned, you can get that at disclosureproject.org. But at that time, we were using these very bright lights, and the police in the area, many of the police were, on previous trips, we had been robbed by police. On one trip, I was robbed, I think, 3 nights out of the 5 we were out. And it's well known that a lot of the police there are involved in that kind of activity. And this particular night, we were out on this site near some old colonial ruins, or maybe pre-colonial ruins, that were near this little town of Metepec. And it was right between Metepec and Atlimayaya, which is the last little village you would get to before you'd have to go on a trail to hike up the volcano. And we were sitting there meditating and doing what we do in our protocols, remote viewing space, contacting the ETs, inviting them to come. And suddenly we saw these policemen coming in, pushing a Volkswagen police car with their rifles cocked and drawn, and coming in very stealthily onto us. Now, you know, whether they thought that we were there trying to signal a drug drop or something, or they were just there to try to harass us and rob us, who knows? Anything is possible. But at that point, we had this whole series of things happen that were, and this is the same night that we had this triangular ship that we were seeing that we thought might have been just lights off in the distance. It turned out weren't. And I think, you know, at this point, I of course realized that we were in real trouble. And I thought, I actually had a remote view that we could be shot by these folks out in this remote area, robbed and shot. And so, you know, I became very concerned. And so I did a sort of a meditation really quickly in the midst of all this, and a prayer calling on the Godhead to protect us and to send protection to us. And that's what I was doing while assessing the situation with these people who came in. And, of course, they came in and started rummaging around in our stuff and checking our binoculars and looking around. And I spoke very little Spanish, but tried to explain a little bit about los ovnis, which is the Spanish word for UFOs, and that we were contacting them and what have you. And what was amazing about this is that they came in a very hostile stance and very aggressive, with the drums cocked and drawn. I mean, rifles, multiple of them. And then they were, after a few minutes of checking things out, they kind of went into an altered state where some spirit or consciousness overtook them. And they sat down, went to their police car and got a guitar out, and they didn't leave. They sat right there and started playing the guitar and singing music together like they were just boys around a campfire. It was the strangest thing you'd ever seen in your life. And I turned to my team and I said, look, with one seamless movement, gather up all our stuff and get in the car, and we're going back to our hotel, which was in a secure facility. That was a gated facility. And that's what we did. And I think, I drove like a Secret Service agency getting the president out of a jackpot. And we left and got out of that situation. But you could feel that there was this not only extraterrestrial energy around us, but angelic and divine energy around us. And then things got very interesting in what happened that night later in our dream state. So Trudy, I would like for you to share what your perspective of this was and what you experienced.
Okay. It was as Stephen said, it was very intense. And so we were sitting on the ground when these police came in with their cocked rifles, and dark as could be in the middle of nowhere, and it obviously was dangerous. It was a very scary scene. But during the whole event, something strange was happening to me. I was not afraid, and I was aware of the danger, but there was something inside of me that was not afraid. And during the time, I kept saying, I put us all in your hands, Lord, to keep us safe from harm and injury. And the police did not hurt me. They did nothing that was, inappropriate. But they came and they walked around us, and they were checking us out. There were two policemen, older policemen, that were behind us, checking out the bushes and things. And as Steve said, it was when the opportunity came, we left very quickly and efficiently, and went back to our hotel. Well, that night, after we finally were able to settle down, and I was falling asleep, all of a sudden, I came out of my body, and I was at the site, our field site there. And I was up above and behind the group, right, but I could see all of us there. And I saw me. And what happened is that I was being shown what was happening in during the real time, what was happening behind the scenes, as Steve was saying. And what it was, I saw angels. They had no wings, but there was an angel behind and above each of the policemen. And they had their arms out, stretched out toward these people. And then it was as if these people were standing on a balcony. And what I saw, when I say these people, I saw about 15 feet above us and behind the angels, I saw a celestial being. I saw two humanoid ETs dressed in like jumpsuits, and there was a smaller ET to their right, and he must have been about 3 feet tall, very pleasantly. He was definitely ET. And they were watching. They were watching us.
Right.
And so it was at that time when I realized that those three lights that we had seen on the hillside off in the distance, these were the pilots of that craft. And they had been there, and they were watching us and taking care of us. And so and they came and protected us during this event. And that's why I was not scared, because I was in that state, and I had given us over to God to protect us, and so that's why I wasn't scared. And that's when, at that point, is when I realized that truly this is what we're doing, and what Stephen is doing is really, really important and is being watched by the cosmic force, and it's very, very powerful. And so that's my take on this.
Right, and it wasn't just that the ETs were there. Now, that night, I had a very lucid dream where I went out into the astral body state. And I'm sure on the World Puja Network, all of you are familiar with these kinds of experiences where you awaken in the dream and you can travel in your subtle body. And I went to this same spacecraft with these same beings that Trudy had the experience the same night after we got back to safety, and had a very prolonged meeting and discussion with the ETs that were in that area, and it was crystal clear. I mean, this was absolutely no question. It was an awake, lucid experience. And that's why the next day when we found out that area where we had just thought, well, those have to, because it was there for so long, this triangular formation of lights. It looked like the C-SETI triangle. If you go to our website, cseti.org, you'll see the symbol, which is derived from a crop circle that we visualized, and sent to the ETs mentally, that they put into a crop circle field in 1992. If you look at that, it was sort of in that same formation. And the people, when we realized that the area we were looking into was an area that had absolutely no electrification, and these were not lantern-type lights. These were electric-type lights we were seeing there that evening, and the craft was literally there. The other thing that's really amazing about this experience is that it shows the interlay of multiple dimensions at once, where you have the physical human dimension going on. There's the extraterrestrial dimension where they were there protecting us. They were not just watching, they were protecting as well. But they were shifted beyond the speed of light into the near astral, into that dimension of subtle energy. And then on a finer level, there's the celestials and then the angelic realm. And then beyond that, the realm of the avatar, the Godhead. And that all is happening simultaneously when we're doing these meditations and remote viewing and contact experiences out under the stars together. So on the one hand, we're sitting in this dusty, sort of barren site by an old colonial ruin with distant forest fires and smoke and the volcano there smoking, and it's all this going on. There's the ET craft there, that the only evidence of which are these three lights on this hillside or near this hillside. And then on these other dimensions, and you have the ETs that are there, the physical bodies of them, and then beyond, beyond that level of frequency, if you wish to look at it that, then you have this other spiritual state. And that's what, of course, Trudy and I were calling on, is that divine power for protection when all this started happening, because I knew it was a very dangerous situation. And interestingly, in all the times I'd gone down to Mexico, this was the only time that no one got robbed. They didn't take our money. They didn't take our passport. They didn't take any equipment. They didn't take the binoculars, nothing. And I have to say, the state that they went into was as if there had been some spiritual, a blanket of grace or something that was put over all those policemen, where they became these blissful little boys. It was just remarkable. And that's when we realize how protected what we're doing is.
And also, I might add that above the whole scene, there was above us a ceiling of angels that were flying around up there. It was thick. It was a ceiling of angels.
Yes, it was indeed. Right. Yes. So that's the kind of thing that began happening shortly after Trudy got involved, and of course continues to this day. And going forward a few months, I just want to say that the first year that we ever went to Blanca Peak in Colorado was after this event in Mexico, and that would have been in the summer of '97 when we went to Blanca Peak. And we're going to go there this year. Those of you who want to find out about this expedition, we're going to be there in June of this year, and it's in a very remote area of the Colorado Rockies in the San Luis Valley, and which is the sacred valley, as it's called, the mysterious valley. And Blanca Peak is the sacred mountain of the east for the Native American tribes of that area. And the first year we went there, I had remote viewed a contact site up on Blanca Peak. And we went there as a group, and at a certain point went up to this contact site, and the whole area was shimmering with lights. And there were about a dozen extraterrestrial beings that were there, and almost in a holographic, etheric form that I could see. And then there was the spiritual realm, and then there was an avatar being, a sort of a universal Godhead being that was there. And it was this amazingly sacred, beautiful contact experience that's described in this book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation. And the following year, we went back there because I said, this was such an amazing, deep experience, and I'm just giving you a few, quick sort of highlights in the interest of time. But we went back in '98, and of course Trudy was there. And when we went up to the contact site, which was above a parking area on the mountain, and we would walk up in the dark, and with the whole group, the area was just lit with light all around us. And the whole way up, there were these various sized ET sentries that were on either side of the path as we were going to go up to this point. And we knew that it was going to be an amazingly spiritual and very special gathering of cosmic people up on this mountainside. And Trudy, you may want to share what you experienced, as I was there sort of communing with this avatar being and these very senior celestial ET elders. And when I say celestial ETs, I'm talking about the ones that they have physical bodies and spacecraft, but their entire civilization is basically where humanity will be in about 500,000 years, where everyone will be in God consciousness and have the cities and the Vedic powers and the ability to materialize and dematerialize, and every man, woman, and child on earth will be in a state of God consciousness. And that's where we're headed in this whole new era that we're in. But these are civilizations that have been there for millions of years, if you can imagine that. Civilizations that have been in a state where their entire worlds are in a state of, at the level of celestial consciousness, even though they have physical planets and physical spacecraft. And those are the very, very advanced extraterrestrial civilizations that are, I call them the guardians of Earth, the ones who have been around for a very long time, being sure that life continues to evolve on this beautiful planet. And so when we were up there meeting with all these ET elders and celestials, there was a series of experiences that a number of people had. In the previous year, when I had this experience, a lot of people who were behind me, as I approached and went up onto the hillside into this clearing, actually could see through me, and I was wearing a big ski jacket, and I'm 6'4" and weigh 225 pounds, so I'm not a small. It's hard to lose me, anywhere. But I kind of became evanescent and translucent and people could actually see through me. And what I was experiencing is even though I was staying in that space, my energy was so high that I felt like I was dematerializing and going into another dimension, which is what people actually were seeing. And Trudy, from your perspective, you may want to describe that as well.
Okay, this event was one of the most amazing and profound events that have happened to me personally. And our group went up the path, as Steve said, and we went into the little contact site in a semicircle. And so we were standing there in the semicircle, and Stephen walks out into the little clearing there, and so I'm watching this. Then suddenly, I am seeing what is really happening there. And what we were in a huge ET craft. And it was enormous. It was like an auditorium.
It was exactly like an auditorium. Yeah.
And there were seats, thousands. I would say, I don't know, between 1,000 and 2,000 seats. And the seats were occupied by ambassadors from all over the universe that were here, that had come to this meeting. And so there was this huge gathering there, and then around in a semicircle around the diplomats, there was a vanguard of Native American people, and they were there as an honor guard. And because the valley, San Luis Valley, is blood-free, there's never been a war there. Blood has never been shed.
Right.
So our purpose is to help bring about universal and world peace. And so they were there as honor guards. And Stephen was going around the edge, and he was talking to different groups of these people. So I'm seeing this, and at the same time I'm seeing the bare ground there of our site, and I saw us standing there. Then suddenly, on top of the auditorium, I see me, and I'm standing there, and I'm about 7 feet behind Stephen, and I'm facing his back. And then in front of him, about 7 feet away, there was this old man. And he was so intelligent and so wise and so spiritual. It was breathtaking. And he was covered in a rich brocade blanket, and it seemed like there was a hood attached somehow. And behind this old man, there was this high arched window. And through the window, I could see blue sky and puffy white clouds. So Stephen and this old wise man were communicating. I could not hear anything, but I was just there. I knew that's what they were doing.
Right.
Then suddenly, from my heart, shot out a tube of golden light. It was pure gold, like liquid, almost like liquid gold. And it was about the width of a quarter and the diameter of a quarter, I would say, because it was a tube of light. And it shot out of me, and it went through Steve, through his heart, and it continued on to this old man, to his heart. And then it came out of the old man's heart back into Steve and then to my heart. And it just went faster and faster, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until there was nothing but this solid liquid gold light. And the light was pure love.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I'm seeing this. I do not know how long it continued, but then suddenly I'm seeing the auditorium, and I'm seeing all the people, all the ambassadors. I see us. I see the honor guard, and then that's gone, and then I see our group are in the semicircle and the little dirt contact site there, and then that was over. It was over. So we went back down to the circle and to discuss what had happened. And so Steve asked, what people had seen or whatever. And so I was hesitant to talk about the gold light because it was so incredible. But when I was talking about the event, then I thought, no, I've got to share this because it's so unbelievable, but I've got to share it. And so I said, well, I had a spiritual experience. And Stephen went, yes. And so I knew that it had happened. It was real. And so then I told about it. And so that's what happened with me. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever experienced.
And I actually saw and had described the same ancient being, this really ancient man that I call the Ancient One, is actually what I called him, if you recall. And was having an experience with the same being at the same time that you were experiencing that. And many other people had components of this experience, but according to their own level of consciousness. And what's interesting, fast forwarding to just a few months ago, is that those of you who have gotten this book I'm talking about and the DVD that goes with it, you'll see that there are these amazing, brilliant objects that flash in from another dimension around us when we're doing this contact work. And the way we do the contact work, those of you who haven't heard this show before, we do have high-powered lasers we send into space, and we have these electronic beeping tones that we send over radio receivers that were recorded in a crop circle, and also one that came to us at Mount Shasta, a very interesting multiphasic tone that we also project out into space. The key component is consciousness, where we, as a group, meditate, go into pure Vedic unbounded consciousness, then remote view deep space or the area where we are and see the ET beings in consciousness. And even if we see them way far in another galaxy, we invite them, and then we zoom into Earth and show, kind of like Google Earth, and show them our exact location mentally and invite them to where we are in a spirit of universal peace and world peace and cosmic awareness. And we do this literally all night, every night that we go out on these expeditions. Well, we were back at this site, Trudy, this summer, in Colorado. And someone had with them, I can't remember who it was, one of our cameras that has a third-generation night vision on a digital camera, which back in the day when this story we're telling you in 98, we didn't have that kind of equipment. It wasn't until 2008, in the fall of 2008 at Shasta, that we finally got this kind of equipment. Well, we just looked last night. Jack Allman, who's a member of our team, is staying at my house this week, and we've been going through the footage, and there, this past year, 2010, up at this exact same site, when we were up there having a very similar experience of contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations and celestial beings, a very spiritual, sacred place. It literally is called, this place that we go to on Blanca Peak is called the Sacred Mountain of the East for the Native American tribes of that part of the United States. And we will be there again in 2011 in June, those of you who want to join us. Well, we look at this video footage, and there, against this bush where I was having this experience, is a brilliant object that comes in and lights, and it is a C-SETI triangle.
Oh, my. Really?
Wait till you see it. You can't believe it. And it's this brilliant white, and it's right there. I mean, it's within feet of where I'm standing.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And those of you who've seen the video from Shasta from '08, you will see that on that DVD, it comes with the book when you order it. There is this triangular craft that's in the field with us that blips in a fraction of a second, and then we slow it down so you can see it. And it's 3 points of light that are brilliant white that come in against a bush or a tree that's right near our contact site at Mount Shasta. Well, that exact same object was there at the contact site where this experience that Trudy just described to everyone. It was there just a few months ago when we were up there on Blanca Peak in June of 2010. And we videotaped it. We got it. So that's the sort of thing that's happening, and to sort of make full circle. And, what's exciting about this is that, we've been going out doing this with groups of people since 1992. It's hard for me to believe. I've been doing it for 18 years. And what's exciting is that the senior contact team that consists of people like Dr. Bravo and Dr. Ted Loader and Trudy and Debbie Foch and Linda Willits and myself and Todd and Goldenbaum and Raven Nabulsi and all these people, it's like together we have like 100 years of experience doing this out under the stars, and it just keeps building and building and building and building in terms of what's happening, in terms of the contact. So it is this countdown to transformation. Because as all of you know, if you go to disclosureproject.org, we launched the global disclosure effort. And now disclosure has become a word used in the New York Times and Washington Post, and just it's become a mainstream phenomenon. And as recently as a couple weeks ago, the government of New Zealand released all kinds of files and images of contact that they'd had in New Zealand. And this is now happening everywhere, from Denmark to New Zealand, Spain, France, the British government, of course, everywhere but the United States. But the United States and Canada don't want to do it, ironically, even though we live here. But all over the world, Chile, for example, and their Air Force, the Mexican Air Force last year convened a meeting and showed their documents and their jet fighter cameras imaging one of these ET craft. They're in the air, not that far from where we had our contact in Mexico back in the 90s. So this is happening worldwide, and so that's continuing to pick up steam globally, but so is the contact. And so it's sort of like the C-SETI triangle, the 3 points to a triangle. One of them is disclosure. One of them is the OrionProject.org, where we're trying to bring out these new energy systems so we can save the environment and get the Earth off of the sort of fossil fuels that are cannibalizing the Earth and keeping so much of the Earth in poverty. And the other is, of course, contact, which is really the base, the tip of the triangle, if you will. It's where all the energy flows to everything else. Because what Trudy and I have experienced as we've gone out all over the world to make contact like this, and Trudy's been with me in Mexico and in England and all over the United States and everywhere, is that the contact is just getting deeper and more profound and more intimate and more proximal. I mean, to the point that a little over a year ago, in November of 2009, we have this extraterrestrial elder from the Andromeda Galaxy that materializes in a photograph 3 feet from our circle at Joshua Tree. And that photograph is up at cseti.org. It doesn't look very good from a website, but we're getting ready to put out a DVD that has it on it. And when you see it on a high-definition screen, you're going to go, oh, my God. And it's just this amazing being who turns and looks right at the camera, at Raven's camera, and it kind of smiles and has its hand up saying hello. And it is a close encounter of the fifth kind. which is when humans invite the ETs to come, and they do come for the purpose of universal peace. And that's what we're doing. We're just completely bypassing the State Department and the United Nations because none of them want to deal with this issue. And so what's exciting is that people can learn to do this, and they can form their own contact team, no matter where you live, whether you're in South Africa or Poughkeepsie or Phoenix or wherever you, and people have. And we're getting people, as you heard recently, our group up in Montreal that have had just astonishing experience after they just went to a sort of a weekend training workshop with me a couple years ago, and they've just had amazing contact that just keeps escalating in that group. And so what I've said to people is that we're creating this morphogenic field that will transform the whole situation as citizen diplomats making contact in this higher spiritual awareness. And at each of these expeditions, by the way, since we're on the World Puja Network, I mean, I don't talk about this on every radio show, we do the sacred puja in Sanskrit and invite in the ascended masters and the higher consciousness and celestial beings. And one of the things that happened, and I don't, Trudy, you may want to talk about this, what you and Fred saw and had happen at Joshua Tree this year. We went to this site in Joshua Tree National Park a couple months ago in November, I guess it was, and where we ended up doing a puja at night on this sandy spot that was in this really remote area that was beautiful. And in that area, we heard the crop circle tones that were recorded in 1989. And then we heard other tones that came right into our group that we have recorded that are new, that were these beautiful high-pitched tones that came in a series of beeps. And then on the side between us and out towards where we had done the puja, there was an evening where the entire field was filled with lights and ET beams and spacecraft that you started seeing as soon as we got there. Remember, Trudy?
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't know if you want to describe that, and I want to point out that we actually got this photograph. Some of these are some amazing photographs of this that both Raven and Emery took, and they were using different cameras, but they got the same objects that Trudy and I were seeing and that and Fred was seeing.
One of the, I thought it was remarkable for me. It was Debbie and Deb and I, during the break, we went up the path, and we went quite a distance, and we started seeing all these lights and over all the bushes. They were just covering the bushes out there, thick with bushes.
Yes.
And both sides of the trail, and it was astonishing. There were just little lights just sitting there. There were flashing lights. There were flares of light, and it was alive. I have never been in an area where there was so much of this type of energy lights going on, and I mean it was clear. Anybody could see it. It was nothing that was, if you have a pair of eyes, you would see it. And so we came back, or we started back down the trail to go back to the circle, and we met up with Steve and several other people. And so we told him about this area, so he went up there, and sure enough, and he's looking up there, he's looking up this little hill, and the thing is alive. And I asked him if I could use his night scope, and so I looked at the area that Debbie and I had been looking at, where all the bushes were, and I looked through the night scope, and there were only a few bushes. So, and with our eyes, we were seeing a field filled with these low bushes, but they were not there.
Right. They weren't bushes.
They were not bushes, and so we were seeing ETs in that form. That's how they took that form. But they were letting us know they were there because of the light, all these lights. And that is one of the most, it was stunning. When I looked at the night scopes and I saw there were no bushes, I mean there were a few bushes, but not covered like we had seen before.
Right,
That
and
was stunning to me.
And that's exactly the area where we had seen a brilliant object that came in, and it was like a light explosion that happened out in the desert, maybe about 20 feet from our circle. And it was right, just a little to the right of where I had done the puja. And the area literally lit up for just an instant, like it was daytime, like the one that happened a few years ago at the other site in the Joshua Tree National Park. And what was astonishing about this is that the people who were there in the circle, many people, everyone looking in that direction saw that. And what I then saw in my remote viewing consciousness is that it was actually an ET craft that came in that was offloading all these groups of ET beings that were there for the gathering of cosmic people and for the meditation.
Yes. Can I tell about the meteor that we saw?
Oh yes, yes, that was amazing.
That night was spectacular. We were sitting, and I was looking. There were quite a few people sitting on the east side of the circle, looking west, and so we saw this meteor, this brilliant meteor, come down. It seemed like it was really close, and it started up at least at 70 degrees, and as it came down, then it turned to gold, and there was a gold meteor, and then there was like a little explosion, and then it was gone. Well, so we report this, and people were reporting it and looking at it as this meteor, and to me, there was something that was happening in me that was trying to tell me there was more. There's more to what happened was a lot more than what we were seeing. And so the next night, at the end, when it went away, a few minutes later, Stephen said, "Oh, there's a being that has come into the circle," and I saw this person also, and it was incredibly intelligent and very loving, and that's the sense I got from that meteor.
Right.
There was intelligence, and there was love to that thing. It was alive.
Right.
So that night, I thought about it and went into it, and this is what happened. This is what I saw, and others did not. And so, but I'm telling you anyway. You can believe it or not. But what I saw that meteor when it started out, and it was brilliant. And as it came down, it left this trail that was half the brilliance of the meteor itself, the light itself. Then it turned gold, and it left a golden trail, half the intensity of the gold light. Then at the end, I don't know if I was looking at the bottom of a craft, but it was circular in shape, and it had like a windmill, but the blades were flat.
Right.
And there was an opening in the middle of it, and so that's what I saw, and so what I feel happened was that was not a meteor. That was a craft an ET craft made to look like a meteor.
Right, and that has happened before. I don't know. It's funny because Jack being here this week, he reminded me his very first event when he was up on Mount Shasta with us. I don't know if you remember that year where, we had these beautiful tones come in that were, when people heard the tones that came in from multidimensional space-time, and it was definitely ET, people could see the spacecraft in the form of the tone. It was very puja, very Vedic, because Sanskrit is name and form, where the word for a bunch of flowers, Pupanjalim, if you do it at a certain level of consciousness, you can materialize it, or Naivedyam, or another word. Well, this was like the tonality of the ship was encoded in the tone, so that when it came into our awareness, everyone saw this sphere and a string of spheres moving along like gray pearls. And that also is when we were there, and when we were breaking circle, we were making a circle, and I was saying sort of a little prayer at the end, and we had, 30, 40, 50 people in a circle out in this national forest at the base of Mount Shasta. And at that instant, there were two objects that went from the east to the west, right beside each other, that traversed the entire sky in a couple seconds, from horizon to horizon, that you could explain away as huge meteors that were two of them together that just went across the entire sky, but they weren't. They made like a rainbow over us, and it was the ETs connecting with us in that consciousness as we made our circle. And so the kind of phenomena that happen is just breathtaking and beautiful, and it never ceases to amaze us how many thousands of ways that we have these experiences happen, up to and including entire craft that materialize around us. But these other things are, in a sense, even more mysterious and wonderful.
Yes, they are. I would just like to close my little story there. The craft the meteor craft that came in delivered the being that came into the circle that we saw.
Yes, and came in from that direction also.
Right, exactly. So it was a total event there that happened, and it was spectacular.
And there was another ET that was there that was transdimensional, where we could see it shimmering and moving around, and it came over to me and Emery, and we had a magnetometer, and the magnetometer was actually going and beating like a heartbeat as this ET being came between us or within us in space-time. And it was definitely not a celestial being. This was an ET being, and it was moving the magnetometer needle. And this is a device that picks up magnetic field flux like you would from a electromagnetic machine or a car engine or what have you, except we're out in the middle of the desert standing by ourselves away from anything. And this energy field comes in, and then it starts beating like the heartbeat of this ET that's standing right there amongst us. And this is exactly what happened in France in July, where we were in this field after this huge craft materialized very quickly, right after I set up the puja table to do this puja in Sanskrit. And then later that night we went out past the puja table, and I was holding my compass, and the compass started beating at the same rhythm as the magnetometer with these ETs that were literally right there amongst us. And they had been fully materialized, but when the whole group, there were about 60 of us, started walking towards them, we saw them and heard them running off. And you could hear their little feet running off, and everyone heard this, and it was like, oh my God, they were shy of a huge group of humans. But then they went into this state, this transdimensional state, where they dematerialized, but were there in this electromagnetic form. And they were there, this one leader of them came between me and Emery, and literally it was like a heartbeat. And initially it was about 80 beats per minute, and then it went up to about 108 beats per minute. And it was amazing, because it wasn't just the magnetometer that was making that pulsing, but when we put on a little light, we could see my compass, the needle on it, beating exactly in time with the magnetometer. It's strange stuff. I know for a lot of people just hearing this are going, oh my God. But that's what you would expect from civilizations going faster than the speed of light. I mean, remember, if it's actually ET and not something being made from a classified project at Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, it's something that is going to be very unusual, because imagine going faster than the speed of light, say from the Andromeda Galaxy, which is 2.5 million light years from here. Well, you can't do that, staying in a solid materialized form. So they have these electronic systems where the craft and everyone in it shifts into this other dimension. And it's almost like an astral. It's like an electronic astral projection, but in a very space-age sort of way, a very electronic sort of way. And that's what we're dealing with, and that's why people have these sort of experiences that are so unusual and yet also so beautiful. And I just want to mention, because we're almost out of time, it's hard to believe it's been almost an hour already, but those of you who are interested, we're going to do a special winter retreat on an island in the Gulf of Mexico called Marco Island, and we're going to be doing that in March. And the information is at cseti.org, cseti.org. And we're going to be there from the 6th of March until through the 12th. And so for that whole week, and it's going to be an expedition. It's going to be a very small group. It's limited to 15 people. And our senior contact team, and so there'll be about a 2-to-1 student registrant senior team ratio, and we're going to have an amazing area because we've gotten permission from a park there on the island so that we're the only group that will have use of it at night, and it's going to be amazing. So again, from the 6th until the 12th of March, those of you who want to join us, the information is at cseti.org. And I'm going to be doing a 3-day expedition in Orange County in February. Those of you who want to make it to that, it'll be February 18th, 19th, and 20th, and we're going to go to a really beautiful area that's another park that's gated that we're going to have exclusive use for our group, and that'll be limited to under 30 people, and it's going to be there in the area around Orange County, up in the canyons west of the population centers. And we're going to be meeting in Irvine during the day, and then we'll go up at night to this park that's a really beautiful place where we were a little over a year ago, where we actually had an ET voice that we recorded that came through and had objects that came right into the canyon and over the lake at this state park where we're going to be. So those of you who want to come to that, information should be up on the website soon about that. We're just finishing up the organization of that right now. So, and then in June, as I mentioned, we will be up on at Blanca Peak and in Colorado in Crestone in June, and that's going to be the week of the 19th of June. So that's Father's Day. So that week of the 19th to the 25th, we will be up in Colorado. And then we're going to be going to the crop circles in July again, the week of the 23rd to the 30th. And again, these are all limited to very small groups. But if you want to come to these, go to the website and contact Debbie Foch, who's our coordinator. And we used to have larger groups, but we're at this point we're trying to increase this as more of a senior research team expedition with only 15 trainees or registrants. So it is a relatively small group, but there are a few of them through the year, and then there'll be these other shorter ones that we'll do that will be allow more people to come. So if you want to come to any of those, feel free to go to the website and look at the dates, and hope to see you at one of them. And Trudy, thank you for joining us today on the World Puja Network.
Thank you, and for having me. I love it.
And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for giving us this time every 2 weeks. This is Dr. Stephen Greer with Conversations with Dr. Greer. And until next time, God bless and keep looking